Not a Gucci line, but, you know, I think I'm looking spiffy. House of Gucci is directed by Ridley Scott, stars Lady Gaga, Adam Driver, Al Pacino, Jared Leto, and Salma Hayek. House of Gucci tells the true story of how Patrizia Reggiani plotted to kill her husband Maurizio Gucci, the grandson of renowned fashion designer Guccio Gucci. Now, I've been a fan of Ridley Scott's work for almost my entire life. I think Alien is one of the most influential films ever made, and I think Ridley Scott is also the master at director's cuts. I've talked about Kingdom of Heaven on this channel last year to celebrate its 15th anniversary, and without that director's cut, Kingdom of Heaven is like a mediocre movie, but with that extra 45 minutes of footage added in, thanks to that director's cut, that movie is now a masterpiece. And there was a movie that came out just about a month ago called The Last Duel that unfortunately bombed at the box office, but it's a movie that I really liked. It had a very touchy, disturbing subject matter that I think Ridley Scott actually handled very well with his directing. He had a sense of vitality and energy to his directing. So no doubt I was looking forward to see how he was going to handle the Gucci story and how his directing was going to come across in this movie. Unfortunately, House of Gucci is very inferior to many of his works that I have seen. It's not a bad movie, but it's not his best, and it's not one of the best of the year like I had predicted it originally was going to be in my head. There are things I like about House of Gucci, so let's start with the positives. The costume design I thought was really great, captured the 90s very well, also really showcased the Gucci clothing line. I like seeing all the different designs and the suits and people wearing the Gucci clothing line in this movie, and seeing how the world of fashion has evolved from the 90s to today, I thought was really interesting. The makeup and the hairstyling is also on point. Hairstyles other than one person, I think really actually fit for these characters. Like when I looked at Lady Gaga towards the end of this movie, I said to myself, I'm watching the real life Patrizia Reggiani because she looked exactly like her. Like the hairstyle, the makeup. Like if you had told me that wasn't Lady Gaga and that was her real life counterpart, would have believed you. Most of the performances, aside from one person, this seems to be a common phrase that I'm saying in this review, are really good. Lady Gaga, man, I mean, I've seen her in two things now. A Star is Born in this movie. I haven't seen her in an American Horror Story. I'm like 900 seasons behind on that show. But these two movies, I would rather see her take up acting rather than continuing her music career. And that's not to say she is a bad singer, she doesn't have talent as a singer. I just prefer her acting ability over her musical career. I think that this is where she really shines. She shines as a singer as well, but I would love to see her focus more and venture more into acting, because these two performances that she's had in these two movies that I've seen, again, the only two things that I've seen her in, have been phenomenal. Adam Driver is great in this movie, as he always is. I really loved him as Maurizio Gucci. Al Pacino is the man, okay? Al Pacino is the bright spot in any movie he's in, good or bad. If it's a terrible movie, he makes the movie good only because every time he comes on screen, he just has energy to him. He knows how to act. And if he's starring in a bad movie, if there's a scene without Al Pacino and then it cuts to a scene with Al Pacino, he immediately just comes into the scene and says, "Hello, I'm Al Pacino!" And that was the vibe I was getting from Al Pacino in this movie. That man he's got some miles on him, man. He looks a little rough for here. What is he, 80? But he's still got the acting talent in him, because he's fucking Al Pacino. Even Salma Hayek was pretty good in her minimal screen time. The person who is not good in this movie, and he will probably tell you otherwise because he thinks he's a method actor when he's really not, is Jared Leto. Man, what the fuck was he playing? This dude looked like Benjamin Franklin. He gave himself the Valdo Obrshev voice, you know, that scientist from No Time to Die. He sounded exactly like him, either that or, you know, Jar Jar Binks dying and just squealing in pain. Somebody compared him to Super Mario. Yeah, maybe he would sound like Super Mario if, like, you put Super Mario into the cannon and you shoot him off the cliff in Cool Cool Mountain. To get to the other side of the mountain where you have to go and get the star and you hit the side of the cliff and Mario just falls down. He's like, wow! Yeah, I mean, in that regard, he sounds like Super Mario, but for me, it was more, he's more of a dying Jar Jar Binks. He just sounded like, Misa going home! Alright, that's Jar Jar Binks if he was alive, but you get my gist. Paulo Gucci, I have no idea if that's what he really looked like in real life, but to me, he looked like Benjamin Franklin. And Jared Leto was the weak link of the cast here. He thinks that going so far over the top in his performances makes the performance stand out more, and I guess it does, but you have to realize when the movie is calling for an over-the-top performance. This movie didn't call for it. I'll give you a prime example. Wonder Woman 1984. A movie that I really liked when it first came out and I've since soured on. I actually think it's a terrible movie now. But the standout for me in that movie, Pedro Pascal as Maxwell Lord. He understood the assignment. He knew that that character, that movie, called for an over-the-top performance. And he totally played into it and he had a lot of fun with it. And he is my favorite part of that movie, even though I now dislike it. Jared Leto went so far over the top to the point of annoyance. Within the first 17 seconds of Jared Leto appearing on screen and starting to talk, I was like, just take away all of his dialogue, because he is really, really getting on my nerves. And he's only been here for, I don't know, half a second. Dude, if I were Ridley Scott directing Jared Leto in this movie, I would have been like, cut, cut, cut. Look, Jared, you get a little pat on the back, but sorry, buddy. You're fired. I don't know how Ridley Scott was like, I want to roll with that as for Jared Leto's performance, because Jared Leto going so over the top is not the equivalent of going over the top like Pedro Pascal did in Wonder Woman 1984. I get two different genres of movies here, but that's when you should go over the top. Or any 90s action movie that doesn't take itself so seriously, over the top. And people still want to see Jared Leto as Joker? I'm as confused as many others are. The truth of the matter is that this movie didn't call for an over-the-top performance like that, even though the script delivers an inconsistent tone. The problem is that Jared Leto is hamming it up in moments that are supposed to be serious, so the serious moments actually come across as an unintentional comedy and come across as annoying, irritating conveniences. Every time he's on screen, I just wanted him to go away. But I think my biggest problem with House of Gucci lies in its script. Its script is so flat. Its script thinks it's a lot deeper than it actually is, but it isn't. And I can give you some examples. The second half of the movie is definitely stronger than the first half, but throughout the entire first half of the movie, it wasn't what I had wanted, and I've been a fan of movies not delivering exactly what I wanted, but this movie's script just felt like it was leaving out so much vital information that was needed to understand the business operations of Gucci, how the Gucci clothing line actually started, what certain situations financially were they put in to get them to specific points that they get to in this movie. And the first half actually really doesn't do that. The first half is more developing the relationship between Patrizia and Mauricio. But even then, that relationship, the script doesn't dive into it as far as it thinks it does. It thinks it's actually giving us a really deep connection between these two characters, but there's such a huge disconnect and a void within the script that when certain events happen later in the film, you're just left emotionless. Like, you don't really buy those moments that happen later in the film. And when it comes to an actual big moment later on in the film, I said, huh. So that's what happened. Huh. Okay. Nobody is going to watch this movie and at certain points be like, oh my god, I can't believe how deep that got. The relationships and the business dealings are very surface level in this movie, and that was a major disappointment for me, especially knowing that the script thinks it's smarter than it actually is. Luckily, the second half does dive into those aspects a little more, but it was too little too late for me. It really just feels like something that feels like it's a first draft of a script. And the tone for this movie is all over the place. It's weird because at times this movie feels like it's perfectly paced, and it's because of the really over-the-top tone that this movie has at times, and maybe that's what led to Jared Leto giving such an over-the-top performance, because he thought that the moments that he was in the film were the over-the-top moments, but they weren't. They were actually the serious moments. But there are over-the-top silly moments in this film that actually feel like Ridley Scott focused more on those, and his directing was a lot stronger in those moments. And the pace of the movie, because this is a long movie, it's 2 hours and 38 minutes. The pacing of those scenes actually felt like it was going by at a breakneck pace. So every time it cut back to some silliness or over the topness, I was actually enjoying the movie a little bit more, even though the more serious moments were the moments that were better. I guess I'm contradicting myself by saying that, since I do think Ridley Scott directed the more over-the-top moments a lot better than he did the serious moments, but the serious moments actually had a little bit more resonance, even if the script was weak. But in those serious moments, the movie felt like it was moving at a sluggish pace. So I guess I was gravitating more towards an over-the-top movie, and I should have expected something like that, and I probably should be praising Jared Leto, but no, it was just annoying, you know? This was a misfire for me from Ridley Scott. I don't think there was as much effort put into this movie as he thought there was, or as the actors thought there was, or as the writers thought there was. Maybe they needed a script doctor to come in and fix up some scenes. I mean, movies do that all the time. It needed a few more rewrites for me. And it needed to really establish a consistent tone throughout the movie, and it needed to get rid of Jared Leto. The other performances, the costumes, and the makeup and hairstyling, I thought were spot on, but this was a disappointment for me. And I'm gonna say I enjoyed House of Gucci with only half a bucket of popcorn, which is actually a true thing, because there was this douchebag in the theater that thought it was funny to sit in my seat when I had all my stuff there and made me rip my bag of popcorn. So yeah, I only had half a bag of popcorn. So that statement holds true with House of Gucci. So guys, what did you think of House of Gucci? Whatever it may be, drop me some feedback in the comment section below. I'll leave my link to my website in the description below as well. You guys are the best. Thank you for watching. My name is Alex Madden, and I'll see you at the movies. Suck.